Former Israeli intelligence officer Ari Ben-Menashe, who was quoted in the recently published book Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales, where he discussed working with Robert Maxwell, who he says introduced his daughter and Epstein to Israeli intelligence, after which they engaged in a blackmail operation for Israel. Ari, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, I'd like to get your comment, if you have any, on the recent arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell in New Hampshire. What do you make of that arrest?
Yeah, the devil is in the details here. First of all, she was arrested by Southern District of New York. It's the Israeli branch of U.S. Justice Department. That's the first thing I'd like to make a comment about. And secondly, why now? Where was she till now? Suddenly they found her. Is that it?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's the exact same discussion we had with Whitney Webb. She was saying the same thing. That Ghislaine obviously bought this property months ago. So why now? Indeed.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of do you have an opinion on why she was arrested at this time?
She probably wasn't even in the States till now. She was made available to them now by some outside government.
Okay. For the sake of our listeners who may be unaware of the book in which you were quoted and some of your history, can you explain how you came to know Robert Maxwell and some of the experiences you had working with him?
I used to work with her father, Robert Maxwell, and was working with Israeli military intelligence, and used to work with him until he moved on after he was accused of stealing the pension fund, the mirror pension funds in England. Somehow he found himself floating out there, dead.
In your capacity working with him, did you ever meet Epstein?
I've seen Epstein in Maxwell's office. Yeah, yes. He was then. Goes back quite a while, about 30 years ago, 28 years ago. He was pretty young, so was I at the time. But yeah.
And so, go ahead.
And his girlfriend, Maxwell's daughter, used to hang around in the Mirror office in London.
Yeah, and that's one of those aspects of this case that's never reported in the media. It seems that they knew each other before the 1990s.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, we know that the day before Ghislaine was arrested, a judge ordered Virginia Roberts' lawyers to destroy documents relating to this case. And what do you make of that? Do you think that those two things might be related? Or do you think that it's a coincidence that they were ordered to destroy basically evidence the day before Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested?
Yeah, I have no opinion about it. This case is really bizarre, and the whole issue is bizarre. Why was Epstein arrested at the time he was arrested? Why did we find him dead at MCC? Then why now, after all this?
Yes.
After all this, so I wouldn't know why the judge ordered what he ordered, but it's bizarre. And now we understand that she says she has some material tapes of their activities over the years. She might try to use them to negotiate a deal. But nobody should envy her in her position right now. Somebody's after her. And they really don't want this information to be out there.
And one thing we can relate back to the day prior, I believe, to Epstein's death, and I spoke about this previously, there was also a release of names and documents from that civil suit by Virginia Roberts against Ghislaine Maxwell. And, the next day we saw that Epstein had allegedly killed himself. Do you have any comment on the actual charges against Ghislaine, which seem, when you read the press release around it, it appears to be a severe indictment, but it's not. There are charges against her actually remarkably they seem to be softball charges. What do you think of that?
Well, the charges against her appear to be just, abusing a child or something of that nature. But she was pretty busy providing children for Epstein's, Epstein's scheme. She was providing the children in order for him to be able to blackmail people having sex with these children. And then on the other hand, you had Prince Charles providing him with his victims. Prince Andrew, sorry.
That's fine.
Mistake.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
And that does bring up an interesting point, and that is that while all the focus right now is on Ghislaine, we're not really hearing a lot about Prince Andrew. We heard a few weeks ago that there was interest from federal authorities in the U.S. in discussing with him his connection to this whole operation. Has your view changed since we last spoke about Prince Andrew? About
No. He's probably being protected right now, and I think it's a pretty embarrassing thing for the royal family here to be caught in such a scandal.
Have you, just out of curiosity, have you had any other further communications from Channel 13 in Israel since we spoke about that incident a few weeks ago?
No, but they were threatening me. They were really threatening me about why am I speaking about the matter and so on. But I'm wondering about one thing here. Ehud Barak, who later was Prime Minister of Israel, but he was the director of military intelligence at the time. This was going on. Why would he be meeting Epstein on a continuous basis? And why would he be meeting Ms. Maxwell on a continuous basis? And why don't we hear from him now about the subject? He seems to be hiding. He didn't even run for elections this time around in Israel since this story became public. And I would like to hear from him publicly about the matter.
That's a very interesting point, and it's a good point to emphasize that you've said that some people confuse the fact that Epstein worked with military intelligence and they diagnose it as working with Mossad. Can you explain why that's such an important point to differentiate?
It's two different agencies.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
Two different intelligence agencies. So they can, if you say Mossad, they can just deny it. And they would be right because it's not done.
In our previous discussion, you characterized the Epstein ring as unique among other sex trafficking operations, even those that may or may not have been run by or linked with intelligence agencies of various nations, specifically because of the wide-ranging influence it had across the world. It wasn't localized in one small area, and because of the powerful individuals involved. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Well, they were blackmailing some very powerful individuals. As I said before, having sex, being caught having sex okay, it's scandalous, it's embarrassing, but it's not a crime. But when you have sex with a young girl or boy underage, that's a crime. And then you can start blackmailing people if you have evidence of that activity. And he probably did have film it or whatever he did with it.
And given the nature of this operation, do you think there's any chance that the victims that have come forward will ever receive any semblance of justice? Or is it just going to be kind of this charade of justice that then ends with nothing?
I believe that somehow this is going to end with nothing.
That's, go ahead.
You know, some very powerful people would want this to go away. Epstein sort of went away somehow. And I hope for Miss Maxwell that somehow she'll be protected and not go away the same way.
Absolutely. I think that there are many people who are concerned that you know, she may not actually see trial, which would be a huge shame for the victim's sake. But
correct.
Do you have any other general comments on aspects of this case that you don't see covered in mainstream media?
It hasn't, you know, they say it's just a case of child abuse. It's much deeper than that. Okay, fine, you have child abuse, but you also have blackmailing some powerful people, and it's a thing operation. It is a intelligence operation, and you know.
And that is definitely one of the things not covered by the press, whether it's in
covered by the press and so on. And you know, her father, Ms. Robert Maxwell, was connected to Israeli intelligence. That's how I knew him, and he connected Maxwell, Epstein, and his daughter to the same people in Israel.
Can you discuss any links that Epstein may have had through Maxwell to the Iran-Contra scandal as well?
Not really. I don't think he had any to that scandal directly. It was only through his, not through Robert Maxwell. I don't think but he was a sideshow. I believe he was a sideshow to that. What he was really doing was, he wasn't even really capable of dealing with those subjects. He was dealing with a different type of issue.
Yeah, and that's something that you also don't see discussed in the press, is that, you know, instead we see him described as this kind of evil genius mastermind. Mm-hmm. But from your perspective, he sounds more like he was almost a chump, you know, in this operation.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I remember them as just, you know, pretty ordinary types that were hanging around this tycoon, the father, Robert Maxwell.
And just to give some context, can you explain Robert Maxwell's involvement with Iran-Contra for our viewers?
Yeah, well, Robert Maxwell was basically laundering money for the Israelis, receiving money through the Gulf states from Iran and laundering it for the Israelis. And he was also involved with the Russians. He was helping the Israelis with the Russians as well.
So moving forward in general, do you see any other prosecutions in this case other than that of Ghislaine? I mean, we've discussed Prince Andrew, but do you think there's anyone else who might eventually face some type of prosecution?
I just don't see it right now, but I may be mistaken. I really don't see it. I believe that they're going to try to kill this case. And whoever is running it, whomever is running it, probably from the Israeli point of view, made a mistake by having Epstein rearrested and Ms. Maxwell arrested as well. But because this brought the whole story up in public, which probably they didn't want to have made public.
Interesting. So what type of mistake do you mean? Like, can you expand on that?
By arresting Mr. Epstein, the matter became public. By him dying the way he died, the matter even became more public. By arresting Ms. Maxwell, again, the subject came up in the press again.
That's interesting. I mean, one could argue that by bringing the matter back into the public eye, that a number of different political figures who had links and alleged links to Epstein would also be tarnished. One of them being the president, Donald Trump, who is obviously running for re-election this year. So there could be some political machinations potentially going along with this, but
correct. Maybe whoever is dealing with this wanted this to become public.
Maybe become public, but not in a materially substantive way, where you kind of have this appearance of some sort of prosecution, but nothing significant really comes of it. Unfortunately, it's
right. Nothing significant will come out of it. That's right. And I would be interested in seeing some of the tapes, at least who is was being taped. And I would also be interested in hearing from Mr. Ehud Barak, about the subject. He suddenly has disappeared from the public eye. He used to be Prime Minister of Israel, and I would also like to know why he didn't run against Netanyahu in the last election. He usually does, and why that didn't happen this time.
Are there any figures involved in this case that don't receive, other than Barak, that don't receive press attention in the way that you think they should?
I think one of the most important figures here is Bill Clinton. And at the time, the Israelis were extremely worried about him because they thought he's going to be another Jimmy Carter that would force the Israelis against their will to do peace with the Palestinians. But he turned out to be not to do that. They didn't. I think he was a very worrying character at the time before he got elected for the Israelis.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, most of us are aware that, obviously he was governor of Arkansas, and there was a lot of history in Arkansas at the time associated with Iran-Contra and all of that. So yeah, definitely a long history.
That's right. He was, but I suppose after he got elected, he was kept under control.
So when you were working with Robert Maxwell, were you aware of any type of, blackmail operation involving children? That is not part of the work that you did, of course. So that our viewers are clear on the type of work.
No, not then. But later it became clear that this was what Mr. Epstein and company were doing.
When you met Epstein and Ghislaine, did you have any insight into their interactions? You described them as kind of normal people, really, or uninteresting?
Normal people, couple, maybe the father was trying to match up his daughter with this young man at the time,
Yeah.
Nothing. But he did take them to Israel and he introduced them to Israelis. Yes.
Were you aware of any other intelligence agencies that Epstein and Ghislaine may have been involved with? We know that he told people in the 1990s that he claimed that he had been associated with the CIA. Were you aware of any of those types of ties?
Possibly, not really, but possibly. Whenever you were tied to the Israeli services, you probably would have ties to the American ones as well. So, so they were sort of tied in together.
Absolutely. There have been, and I've reported previously on historical intelligence ties to some other child sex trafficking and sex trafficking rings. Do you think, what is your opinion on the kind of ubiquitousness of this type of operation over time, over the decades? I mean, because the reason I ask is because the press seems to want to represent Epstein as this lone predator, a lone aberration, and something that is obviously not going to happen again, and things like that. And it seems when you look at the bigger picture of this historical trend, that's not the case, and that he's not this aberration.
Well, I haven't seen it happen anywhere else, but like everybody else, I heard about the different thing, but really personally, I haven't seen it happen. This is the only time I've seen it happen.
Understood. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we close?
No, I hope this will resolve itself in a way that the public will get more information about what really happened and so on. We'll see what happens. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Well,
thank you. Okay.
Appreciate it.